Ladies and gentlemen, guess what? I got a beautiful podcast for everyone today. Hope the sun is shining. Hope the birds are singing. Hope the wind is at your back. I hope that you are ready for some contagious ideas that are meaningful. I've got the one and only Eric Postow. It is my pleasure to introduce him as a legal luminary and the managing partner of Holon Law Partners. Renowned as the top operational planning voice in his field, Eric's expertise extends across regulated industries, First Amendment religious freedoms, and the dynamic hemp beverage industry. A graduate of the University of Richmond School of Law. Hailing from Annandale, Virginia, Eric stands at the forefront of representing clients in the ever-evolving landscapes of regulated cannabis and hemp beverage markets. His legal acumen extends beyond conventional boundaries, as he passionately advocates for religious freedoms within intentional communities, navigating the delicate intersection of spirituality and the commercialization of psychedelics and natural plant medicines. Eric, thank you for being here today. How are you?
That was the most amazing introduction I think anyone's ever done for me in my life. Can you just show up and I walk into a place and then you announce it like that and everyone's gonna turn around, who the hell is this guy?
They just stand up and start clapping. Yeah, Eric.
What did he do? Nothing. Okay, great.
Woo, high expectations, man.
Yeah, man, it's cool to be with you. I appreciate that. I hope I can live up to such a. Sounds like I'm doing a lot of cool stuff when you put it like that.
Well, I talked to you before. You and I have had a conversation before, and we see each other on LinkedIn. And I think you are doing cool stuff. And more than cool, I think one way to define cool, at least in my life, is meaningful. And I think it's very cool when you meet people that are doing things they're passionate about and meaningful. And I'll just hand it off to you with that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, if I'm doing anything in my life, I'm living a very intentional life, and because I'm very intentional, I find myself doing the things that matter most, and they are meaningful. So I'm meaning making in the world because I'm doing exactly what I want to be doing, which is to do things that are meaningful. To be at the epicenter of stuff going on where we have to think collectively. Our global consciousness has to become aware of something so that we can see things for the way they are and make choices, right? To become more intentional globally, I am being more intentional locally, I suppose is the best way to describe that. And because I'm being intentional, I get to work with amazing people and collaborate with terrific lawyers and non-lawyers and think about issues at a really deep level. Like, what does medicine mean anymore? And examining how the changing landscape, because of our newfound Western awareness of psychedelics and plant medicines, is evolving and what that might look like and what might be necessary for some containers and safety and integration and things like that from a holistic legal perspective. So meaningful work is certainly what I get to do, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, you should be. I think we both share a passion for language on some level, and it's interesting to think about the world is made of language, and especially someone in your field who's a lawyer. Like right now, you are just you are deep in the tapestry that's weaving together these ideas of spirituality and law. And maybe you could speak to that a little bit, like the language that's going on right now and the ever changing language. Your passion with language and what you're doing with it.
I love language. I love words, and I also, have a great appreciation of evolve. I start to see how limited we can be as a community, as a society, by the words that we're choosing to frame around us. As a lawyer, this is clear in our laws. What we say the laws are, the words that we define, we exclude things, we include things, all by the usage of words and terms. And this can be extended more broadly to religiosity and spirituality. A great word, ineffable, a terrific word that means, I can't tell you what it means, right? It means beyond. It means it's something that can't be explained, can't be put into words. And if I try to put it into words, then I'm going to limit it in such a way that it can't be limited.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So if I understand that from the spirit mind perspective, that I want to transcend the limitation of words to connect to source, right? To connect to something beyond, something here, something present, nature, something that's alive and with me, and all of these things, then I have to look beyond what the limitations of words are. And in my practice, I'm working on legal issues that require seeing beyond the limitation of words, and try to help ourselves catch up, because legal frameworks are important, laws are important, regulations are important, safety of the community is important, and we have to have that level of thinking so that we can help inspire what the laws ought to be and what they could be, and then beyond that to help our community evolve with necessary changes, which can be scary. But
Sure. And why wouldn't it be scary when you're talking about uncertainty or the unknown, even spirituality? Like, these are scary topics because we don't know. We have ideas, we have faith, we have the ineffable, but they are scary, right? People are afraid of what change will do.
yeah, that is always the case. Change for a country, in politics. Look how much trauma we are going through right now in our country, in the United States. We are a traumatized nation, and that trauma is manifesting in violence in communication and violence in action and other things. And I think that I think we got to find people that are Sherpas and guides to get through this stuff, this phase, this time, and to bring into the newness, things that are healthy, things that are healing, things that are bringing people back together, connecting folks at that heart chakra, getting back to the source of humanity, and the things that make humanity special and good, and to be in better relationship and community with nature, and not just trying to oppress everything around us at all times. And I don't win if you don't lose, that kind of mindset. And I think that's one of the things that I'm hopeful for, is that we can get through this dying era and into a new era. So I work at areas of the law that I think are helpful in shaping that and oriented around friction.
I love it. It's interesting to hear you use ideas like a Sherpa and a guide, and it definitely seems like almost like we need a death doula. Like, part of us seems to be dying, and we have maybe that's what you're doing on some level. Maybe you're like this death doula that's helping these old ideas, be fertilizer for the new ideas that come out of it. Maybe you could talk to that a little bit.
Well, I mean, and if you think about the name of our law firm, Holon, it's a term that has Greek origins, but it's been articulated well with some recent academic folks, and essentially, the Holon view is that we are in this ever transcending state of hierarchical, relationship. That there's the Holon of you in relation to the Holon of me, and that together we're making the Holon of True Life podcast. And then we're extending out, right? We're transcending and including, and we're going all the way out until like global society and international relationships and all these different types of things. And then also relationship to plant life and animal life and ecosystems and things like that. For sure. And so we try to take that concept and put it into practical legal application. We see things as a series of interconnections and relationships. And because of that, we see community where we work with our clients and in the broader space. And we find connectivity between those things to help achieve important societal goals.
The human mycelium.
Yeah, that's right. In a lot of ways, I
Right?
think I spend a lot of time thinking and learning about intelligence. Reading a fantastic book right now by Paco Calvo, who is a professor at Mint, MINT, and what they do is they're studying for intelligence in plants
Mm.
that is akin to human intelligence, the intelligence that is decision making, that is orienting, that is remembering, that's anticipatory, predictive. We understand better now than we have in a long time how mycelium works, the fungi network. It's communication. Mycelium kind of spreads and has these ways of communicating with the nature around it, with trees and with plants and things like that. They create symbiotic relationship. They feed, they eat, they decay. They're part of that system. It's how we've evolved like this. Plants are similar. At least that's what some of the research coming out of Mint and other places is looking at. And I want to learn from that intelligence.
Yeah.
I think there's value in that intelligence. And even if there's a debate over whether or not that's true intelligence or it's some sort of adaptive thing, it's irrelevant. If they're building network underground in the plant world and the fungi world, and those networks are doing things and they're working together, they're collaborating, and they're mutually supporting, and they're coexisting and co-thriving and co-creating, well, then we can learn from that, and we can build models that also includes our connectivity in the way we do relationship.
Yeah.
And we can go and be supportive as a community network, a web of relationships, and show up for people and show up for communities that need it. That's how mycelium, reallocation of resources. It's the way the brain works also. It's no coincidence that the brain and the neurons and that system in the brain of processing looks an awful lot like the root systems of fungi and plants and things like that. We all come from the same place. So we've evolved. That's where ours is. And it's no coincidence that that's what the galaxies look like. When you look at the pictures coming through the new telescope out there, oh my God, it'll blow your mind. But what you see is those relationships, those large scale network things that are occurring that look a lot like brain cells, look a lot like the mycelium networks. Coincidence? I don't know, but interesting and worth learning from, worth integrating that kind of wisdom and knowledge and seeing equality, seeing an equal in plants rather than a subspecies that humans tend to do. We would categorize and then subcategorize and subcategorize, right? So I think our minds can be enlightened with the knowledge coming out of some of this research. And because of that, I think that we can integrate that into practice in different ways: business, community, legal, anything. I'm rambling, but
No, it's good. It's perfect. It reminds me, like I often feel, and I want to read this book too, but I was sitting outside my patio a while back, and I had taken like a medium, like a museum dose, and I was just sitting out there, and I was watching this vine that had climbed up halfway up this palm tree, and it climbed halfway up, and then I thought to myself, like, wow, what an amazing adventure this thing is on. And I noticed, like, how does it know to to sprout a flower at a 47-degree angle towards the sun on August 7th at 3:33 p.m., 3/4 of the way up that tree. Like, that's intelligence. Like, that's faith.
Yes,
You know, like,
you're diving
and then
right
it
into
gave
what the
me the
book's
idea.
about.
Yeah, like, how can it not be?
That's
That's what we
what
should
the
learn from,
science
right?
is. They've observed this thing, and there is something to it.
Yes.
It's remembering, and it's planning, and it's doing things intentionally
Yes.
to survive and to, get better, to grow, to thrive, have offspring, whatever it's doing. It's
Yeah.
not doing it just because it's reacting.
Right.
It's doing it because it knows that that's what it has to do, and it's planning and organizing. And there's interesting things from the book where they reorient the plant, and then after a day it finds its way back to finding where the sun is and being exactly where it's supposed to be,
Yep.
so that it can maximize getting the sunlight in for the photosynthesis process. Yes, it's part of evolution, but it's also an intelligence that's doing that knows to do that type of thing. And they've got some interesting narrative around, the sprouts and being things, and
Yep.
it's climbing up. I'm not a plantologist, so obviously I sound ignorant when I talk about these things, but I can take from it the wisdom of that.
Yeah.
That the plants aren't climbing towards the light just because it's an adaptive thing. They're climbing because they're geared towards intelligence, towards this thing. That's thinking about it and planning, and then using some kind of a calculus. Like there are plants that have like a lassoing kind of effect,
Yeah.
and they lasso on to something so that it can climb. We got these climbing vines, but did anyone ever think about why they do that? And how, and what's the mechanism underneath that's potentially an intelligence there? And why should we be so arrogant as to think that it couldn't be an intelligence? That's the other thing that gets you thinking.
Yeah, I think we're children, and the world is desperately trying to communicate with us to reveal the answers to us. Like, here, look, this is community. Look at all of these. You can go outside your yard and look down and find an ecosystem. It may have like a dandelion, like a certain type of tree and some grass. Like, that's an ecosystem right there. It's teaching you community if you know what to look for.
Absolutely. Nature it communicates with us all the time. We don't listen. We're not tuned in.
Right.
And I don't think that you have to have psychedelics or plant medicines to do that. I think that you can do that in your everyday life just by, slowing down, being intentional, being aware, being observant, really seeing something, and like taking what's happening and integrating into yourself and saying, well, what does it mean?
Yeah.
What's the meaning of this thing? People like to go stargazing, and they like to go like the nature walks and all this stuff. There's learning right there, because all it's doing is being truth. It's just truth happening in whatever degree. And the learning, the teaching, is whether or not you can capture that happening, that essence, and say, oh shit, there's something happening here.
Yeah.
And then what? Then your human brain starts doing things with it and making sense out of it. And it's in that where I think potentially we've got a lot of ability to transcend where we're currently at, which we need to. We need to get to a place of elevated awareness so that we can see the choices anew, a fresh lens, if you would.
Yeah.
Same facts, just a slightly different perspective, so that we might make different choices. What choices? Choices like whether or not you understand that nature is alive and that it feels and that it's a part of you, and that if you kill it, you're killing yourself.
Yeah.
And that right now we're committing slow suicide and we should probably stop.
Yeah, I do.
It's and this isn't like a wackadoo thing to say. It's just an observable fact of the world around us. It's happening, and people are like, oh, is climate change? That's not real. We get stuck on the words.
Yes.
We get trapped by the words instead of the happening, the fact happening, the existence, and just seeing it, being like, I know what's happening here. I can see it.
Yeah.
And then I want to discover why. Well, we're killing the lungs of the planet in the Amazon. We've been doing that for a while. We do that for commercial purposes so that we can continue to exist in a certain lifestyle, and it's an unsustainable lifestyle. And so I think one of the interesting, adaptations that humans are currently working through is a movement towards sustainability in different ways. And ecological sustainability and living balanced harmoniously with nature is a dire human need right now. Because the consequences would just be the end of it all, end of us, and nature would continue on. We would melt away and something else would come up, I'm sure.
It's interesting to think about the ailments of the human race are a direct reflection of what we're doing to the planet. Like when you talk about the lungs of the planet being the Amazon, how many people on the planet have problems with smoking? I wonder if there's a correlation between the amount of people that are dying from certain types of things and what we're doing to the planet. Like, smoking, people dying from lung cancer may be equivalent to us killing the lungs of the planet. If you look at obesity as a problem, maybe that's over farming in some ways. Like, it just seems to me like those things are connected on it. Like if we could just pan back and have like a giant collective psychedelic experience, I think we could see the fractal nature of it. Like, oh, this is us. This is us right here causing this problem.
And I think that is one of the potential benefits of psychedelic in a therapeutic model, is that it's the ability to step inside and outside to observe from different angles so that you become more aware of something, and you drop the conditioning or the false narrative that you're gripped by, the addiction to the narrative itself, whatever that might be about your life or the world or whatever. And, I'm not someone that says psychedelics are for everybody, but I do think that they present a very powerful opportunity for folks to see themselves and their relation to others and the planet differently. And I think that what plagues humanity broadly right now is a decaying spirit mind. I think that the spiritual experience has become so contaminated and constrained and toxic in a lot of ways that it repels people. It creates divisions and very conditioned and rigid minds that are not flexible, that are not malleable, that cannot see beyond like programming. And I think that there is the ability to deprogram, not to reprogram. I think some folks think there's dangers that you're going to use it to program people. I think it's the opposite. I think it's going to deprogram a lot of folks who, in whatever way, degrees, right? And very, very subtle in some ways. Could just be, an addiction to a drug, deprogramming the conditioned addiction, and things that are woven around that. That you can see it a little bit differently within yourself. Let go of the grip, and come through the other side, not needing to go back to drugs or alcohol or something like that. It's just one example that I think highlights this.
It's interesting on a lot of levels where we're at right now in the shift in programming and deprogramming and fear and all these things that we've lived with for so long. And I'm curious, right now in the United States and in Canada and some parts in Europe, like we're seeing lots of people trying to establish a new way for these substances to come in and make changes. Do you think that maybe you could just speak to that a little bit? Like, is that multiple ways of trying to find the right way, or is there not one right way, or is each one of these a potential pattern, or is each one of these particular ideas a potential model for other people to learn from and go from? Or what's your take on the hot spots right now?
I think it's fluid, dynamic, unhealthy, healthy. I think it's a smorgasbord of things.
Of course.
I think there's a lot of experimentation with models, and I think it's beyond the regulated scene. I think the regulated scene is trying to copy the unregulated scene and replicate it in a lot of ways. There's where you get a lot of misappropriation and some cultural things, stuff like that. I think there is a lot of danger in inexperienced people claiming to have more experience and not doing the homework and doing the work themselves to make sure that what they're doing is safe and directed at, pro-social, healthy communities. I think some people just want to sell drugs, and they want to come up with, methods of doing that they think are quasi-legal. And I can tell you they're not in those instances.
Yeah.
But I do think, there's a lot of learning going on, and I think there is an experimentation. I also think that there's lineage that are thousands of years old of wisdom that's been handed down in traditional and indigenous communities. And I would hope that their voice and their practices and their medicines are, respected and revered and honored and looked towards as, potential collaborative sources of sharing wisdom rather than things to take from and make money off of. I think that there's potential for abuse there. I think there's a potential for abuse, broadly speaking, in totally uncontrolled environments, a lot of sexual misconduct and things like that I think are harmful for the broader, movement. And I think people have to speak truth to that and hold folks accountable. And holding the medicine, as I've come to understand, it's a very sacred obligation, a responsibility. And some people are not worthy to do that. And they are doing it. And because they're not worthy and they're doing it in harmful ways. And that's not a judgment thing. That's just a call it what it is. And great organizations are thinking about this. I think Shakrina's out there doing a lot of good work and covering down on some of these topics. Psychedelic Bar Association I'm a member of. I know it's got a lot of really beautiful minds and committed people that care about these things. I'm very fortunate to be able to, collaborate with some of them, and practitioners and just wonderful humans out there that are doing it the right way. But to do it the right way, we have to speak about the things that are not the right way. And when they're harmful, when they're harming people and not leading to a healthier community for us all, well, that's probably not the right approach.
Yeah, it makes sense. What is there something specific that, like, I know you got a few projects going on right now. Maybe you could come walk us through some of them and what you're excited about, some of the pitfalls might be, or what you got going on over there in your neck of the woods.
Well, I can't talk about all the things that I'm doing for client sensitivities, but what I can tell you is that I am working on things that are really informative. And I like to work on things where I know I have blinders so that I can become more aware of the blind spots and, have that deeper personal work.
Right.
And I'm getting to do that. I love examining, the language and what do things mean, and to help folks find their voice in certain communities so that we can give meaning, a more updated meaning, restored meaning in some instances of some of these terms that are out there, and hopefully that helps the broader collective conversation. So I'm definitely spending a lot of time in the plant medicine space, from a legal perspective and a historic perspective, just doing what I can do to support those that I'm working with and learning from that. And then in the cannabis space and the hemp beverage space, those are commercial, and I like them too, and I find them rewarding, and there's great business people, and I try to be helpful, and I think my clients have found my approach to be really collaborative, really empathetic, and oriented around them and their dreams, and I think they know that I'm a solid foundation to work from. So I've enjoyed that space too. But the more meaningful work to me is in this plant medicine and psychedelic space, because I think that's where we're really talking about nerve points for so much more. And then that's honestly where I think you want to change the world, start to understand how intelligence works, how the mind works, how the spirit mind works, how these medicines work, and why we need to explore it further and develop structures and support mechanisms and on and on. And I think that's where I'm finding a lot of energy for myself.
There's some interesting similarities and some differences when I look at the world of cannabis and psychedelics. One sort of similarity that I see that's not just partial to plant medicine, but other things, is that when the instrument becomes the institution, it loses its ability to be functional. And it seems to me that that's kind of what happened with cannabis a while back. When it became institutionalized, it sort of lost its ability as an instrument. And I'm curious if A, do you see that pattern? And two, do you think that psychedelics may be going in that direction? It's like you spoke earlier, when there's people that just want to kind of extract out of it, like the same extraction mentality that we have for raw materials. Hey, I want to extract the money out of this plant. I want to extract this out of there. But maybe you could speak to the idea when the instrument becomes the institution, it begins to be corrupted.
I don't know. I mean, yes, on some instances, it's tough because I'm in the cannabis space in particular. I think of the social underlying issues a lot more than the medicine itself. I think it certainly gets absorbed into culture stuff and commercialization, and but the plant is still the plant, and it's still saving a lot of lives out there, quite frankly, and helping a lot of people in really important ways. And from a commodity perspective, becoming a real driver of economy and market, and that's a good. Some could say that is the commercialization is it soulless? Well, it's the collective of all these different things, these people and their hopes and dreams and all that stuff, and belief in the plant. But then it takes on the normal capitalist commercial thing, and does it as an entity. It might not look like something that was familiar and comfortable, and may have lost the myth or the allure or whatever. But from a medicine perspective, it works pretty good, and I think that shouldn't be lost. From the plant medicine side and psychedelics, I think that there's a really interesting merging point of friction between language and historical circumstance. I don't think that you can really work in the space of psychedelics and not think about colonialism and not think about Western oppression over indigenous experience since the West came to where we are now in the Americas, North America, Central America, South America. So I think that bring awareness to some of those historical things. I mean, these traditions and people often were killed for their medicines and, treated with disdain, and, a cultural genocide was afflicted, and that is part of the psychedelic story. On the other hand, we have the present as it is, and Western modalities of pharmacology and Western therapy, psychotherapy, so on and so forth. And so there's this interesting balancing thing happening where the states are kind of coming online with these regulated therapeutic models that look kind of like Western therapy, but also really kind of take from ceremonial sacramental concepts. And I think that potentially where it will come down to will be on the natural plant medicines versus the synthetic pharmaceuticals like ketamine and things like that, which have a tremendous amount of therapeutic value, and so do some of these other things. But there's more interesting historical connotation. MDMA is another one that's probably going to be fully legal within the next, I don't know, year or two. It's close. Seems very close if you pay attention to what MAPS is doing. And I think that there's a place for that. I think there's an important place for ketamine treatment, for MDMA, and even psilocybin and some of these other ones. But then I think it gets murky, and I don't want to see a continuation of a Western dominant language oppressing expression and culture, and trying to act like psychedelics. Yeah, 20th century, that was us, right? It's like, no, we're talking about 13,000 years of history here of historic communal use, and reverence in a way that we really don't comprehend. And it's hard for Western minds to get their minds around it. So I think it's an interesting social point. And I know there are others that see this as well. And then there's folks that don't see that, and they're fine too, and they're just working towards, this is important, and we want access to these types of therapies, and we should have, human rights to these kinds of medicines, and so on and so forth. And they're trying to create, what are the containers for this? What are the structures for this? What would it look like? If you were trying to get a DEA exemption for your church, to have these things, knowing that the DEA is probably never going to grant it. But if you were trying to do that, what would it look like? How would you create safety, and how would you structure it, and how would you do an integration before, during, after, to make sure you're taking care of people and not just drugging people, right? I think that there is a difference there, and I think that that's part of the experimentation to find who's better at this, because there are folks that are really deliberate and intentional, and they're doing all the right things, and they're taking care of people, and they show up after. Yeah, they got paid a year ago. They're showing up. They're saying, "Hey, how's everything going? Where are you in your life? Like the follow up. How are your relationships?" And I think that that's a really positive and powerful thing. And I hope to see more of those types of things personally.
Yeah, I like that. One thing that I really admire about the indigenous culture and their use of some of this plant medicine is that, the idea behind ceremonies and rites of passage as a path forward for people. It seems like in the Western world, we have medicine for ailments. Yeah. But isn't a rite of passage a sort of way for you to outgrow the small-mindedness that you once had. Like a young man becomes a man. Like that is medicinal. Like, okay,
Yeah.
now I no longer need to do this. But sometimes that comes with the insights from the plant medicine. Like that seems to me something that the West can learn from, is like, it need not always be in this rigid medical container, because a rite of passage is also a medicinal act. It is a way to take the limits off of this small mindedness when you're ready, or take the training wheels off on some way.
That's why the word medicine matters.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly. Yes.
That's why it matters what you say it is. And when we understand that these medicines have been used for community healing.
Yes. Well said.
Or rites of passage for growing up. I learned about a tribe that tribes that they went through I believe it's the Huskana, North American Indian tribes. And they, around the age of 15, there would be a ceremonial kidnapping of the boys. And the mothers would wail, and their children are dying.
Right.
And the boys were taken to the woods, and as documented in historical observations of Westerners watching this and artifacts, part of whatever was going on in the woods, this transition transcending into an adult, this rite of passage included plant medicine usage, psychedelic plants, and experience what's happening and whatever. Then they would come back and they would be integrated back into community as an adult, where they would take on an adult role, marry, do whatever. Some of them would not come back to the community, but would go off into the spiritual world, where they would be the ones that were communicating between worlds, so that they could be the continuation of the spirit of these people and this happening in this life on earth, and usher people through this process and ensure their their continuation. And this is not a limited situation. Things like this were happening all over North, Central, and South America. Right. And maybe still are in many instances. And yes, the medicine was an integral part of that community's life and experience. And when we said, kill the Indian, save the man, that is what we were killing. We were killing this life, this experience, this relationship to the place that they were, that was sacred, that is sacred. And then we fucking remove them from the place, forced removals, like tearing you from your mother's arms kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe even deeper because of the relational thing of the connectivity to the land and to the plants and the ecology. All right. And, I think that we need to acknowledge that history when we do this kind of work. And they're not dead. That's one of the things, tribes of all kinds, indigenous folks, they're here and they're living, and they're wonderful to work with and learn from. And, sure, something I observe out there as a very important story that we can continue to share, because the story is medicine also. Keeping alive what actually happened and what is happening and what can happen, and telling a story about a better way of being. And so, as a storyteller, that's what I do in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It reminds me, there's a great book called Black Elk Speaks. And in that book, he talks about, there was a time when I'm paraphrasing, but it's something along the lines of, the white man came to us and said that he wanted to buy the land, and we laughed at him. Like, you can't buy the land. The land belongs to everybody. We just thought it was a foreign concept.
Yeah.
They did do it. And it kind of makes me wonder, like, in today's world, people want to buy the air right now. They want to buy the air you breathe. Hey, you have some carbon credits over here. Like, we laugh at it like, oh, you can't buy the air. Maybe you can. I mean, if you want to know what large parts of the government, if they're trustworthy, we should be asking indigenous people, hey, are governments trustworthy? Like, what are they going to say? You know what I mean? There's the lessons there. There's real lessons, I think,
Absolutely. History is important, right?
Agreed. Yeah.
And I think, far too often we just have this Eurocentric view of history.
Totally.
We don't know enough about other cultures and stories. We know some of the famous ones, like we know Genghis Khan, but we don't really know in the details, right? We don't know the ancient history of China, broadly speaking, and where those people came from and why they view the world the way they do and what's underlying a lot of those, characteristics and things like that. Same everywhere else. We just know our own history, and the world started in 1776.
We know the truth, right? That's what really happened.
Well, liberty.
It's so silly. It's so crazy.
And look, I'm a proud American. I was a Marine Corps veteran, and it has nothing to do with it. I think being a real American means, holding America accountable.
Yeah. Well said.
Saying we could do it better, and we should be honest with ourselves.
Yeah, it's so true. It's such an amazing time. Let me, in navigating the intersection of religious freedoms and the commercialization of psychedelics, what challenges have you encountered, and how do you envision the evolving landscape in this unique legal space?
I don't know. There's some funny comment. There's some there's a lot of smart people that work work in this space, and I don't know, it's too early to say exactly what everything is. It's all just unfolding in like different directions. I think the Oregon model is going to be fun to watch, and hold on to your hats, right? Because they're when you miss big in psychedelics, shit can happen. So I think that we really need to kind of watch what's going on in the structures perspective and make sure that the licensees that are doing this are doing it well, and that the right ones are doing it. It's not just like, cannabis, like sell someone a bag of weed. It's you're taking someone's life in your hands and you're ushering them through a process that's really transformative. Yep. You gotta be intentional. You gotta do it well, and I hope that we'll see a lot of good stuff there. But I'm prepared for things that are challenging, and then that's going to reverberate in this, political speak to myself thing where we're saying, see how dangerous it is. This thing happened. Yeah. This thing happened, and then now it's all gone to hell. But I do think the conversations where religion meets commercial, where indigenous voices might be not heard enough. I think it's an evolving thing, and I am pleased to be involved and trying to participate and hold space and share thoughts when asked, so on and so forth.
Yeah, there's a really great company that I've spoken to, Moksha Journeys, that has Prema and Rose and Sienna over there, and I've had them on the podcast multiple times, and they have shared with me they've had a first cohort come through their whole program, and they intermingle the idea of indigenous wisdom and Western talk therapy, and they had some people that came through that were highly addicted, and it's not uncommon for people in the first week or 2 weeks of therapy to, still score high on the addiction model. Like they can still score like on a scale from 1 to 10, like an 8 in the first week. But some of the people going through using psilocybin and the talk therapy and the things that were happening there, they came way down to like a 2 on the craving sort of documentary, not documentary, but a survey and stuff. So, I do have a whole lot of hope and promise for finding new ways to deal with addiction. And it seems like psychedelics really allow you to set the shame and the guilt of addiction aside and focus on the problem that may be causing addiction. So a lot of the times it's something that we're afraid of or something that we did that we don't want to talk about it.
Childhood trauma, man.
Agreed. Generational. Yeah.
Generational trauma, historical trauma.
Yep.
And in the last 20 years, we've had some really epic, jarring trauma moments.
Yeah.
We had 9/11. That was a jarring trauma moment.
Huge.
We had COVID. That was a jarring trauma moment. We had, smaller but not lesser impactful, like the George Floyd's and the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah.
Counter movements, the strangeness of whatever's going on in the certain political camps, and the voices that are heard the most. Sometimes you're like, wow, that's aggressive.
Yeah. How did that voice get out there? How is that so loud?
Our voice. That's one of the things I think that the people miss. It's like that's all of us right there. Scream as loud as I can and tell you how wrong you are. Right? That's us constantly.
Yeah.
Demonizing the other side.
Ourselves.
Demonizing ourselves. We are them, they are us, we are one, but
yes,
we distinguish and categorize and create containers of people. That's not me. I'm not racist. I have a black friend somewhere.
I know a gay guy. What are you talking about?
Well, there's all these things, all of that stuff. This gets into social communication and privilege and things like this, and people really get animated about that. And it's like, perhaps if we just explored, the context without it being so animated, and just observed it, more communally, maybe we might have more awareness with which we can do something about that. I don't know. I think we have a lot of issues of bias in this country, in the world.
Sure.
Bias in general is a human conditioned thing, maybe not even human, maybe beyond human, but the ability to be aware of the bias, that's also a key to unlocking a lot of these things. Becoming aware of the implicit nature of the bias that's driving us, thereby making it no longer implicit. Now I have a choice to make. If I'm aware of my bias and I confront my bias in a decision, I can at least stop myself and say, what's going on here? Am I making a decision out of bias? I'm acknowledging it. Maybe I make a different decision. I don't know. Worth a shot, don't you think?
Yeah, I do. I do think that. I think it almost goes back to the beginning of the conversation when we talked about the wisdom that we can gain by watching nature. Like the same way that plant crawls up that vine and knows how to do it. I think that is that thing inside you that says like, hey, this is wrong. I shouldn't do this. Like that's the innate wisdom we have. And when you follow that, I think you become like that vine and you know how to sprout a flower at that same angle. When you follow that voice, like that's your divine wisdom. Like that's nature talking to you through you. And we're so conditioned not to listen to it. Like, well, I'm going to be one of these four things. I went to this Pavlovian school where there's whistles and bells and I got a hall pass and
Yeah. I never got the pass. I just went to the halls. I think you're right. I think we have to see outside of our structures right now.
Yep.
We have to be able to observe it, call it what it is, be honest about it, and then see what the choices are. Just becoming aware of choice, man. That's it. You're choosing this every day to live like this as a global humanity. Like we're making phenomenal choices that have unquestionable consequence. And we're doing it all the time. So we should be aware that we're making a choice and what the choice is, and maybe make different choices where it matters most. Meaningful.
Yeah. On some level, there's a rite of passage that a lot of people go through, both men and women, and it's nowhere near celebrated enough or talked about enough. And it's this when you have a child and you seeing your child grow. For me, my experience was not too long ago. Like I was a UPS driver for a long time, like 26 years. And I realized, and this is right around COVID, I realized that what am I doing? Like I'm working like almost 80 hours a week. My wife's picking up the kids. She's working from home. She's doing all these. I never see my family. I'm making good money, but I never see my family. I'm always gone. And I heard that voice inside me, like, what are you doing? And then all these questions come up like, well, you like the money, don't you? And then I started thinking, like, I'm telling my daughter that I want her to live a meaningful life and that she should do the right thing. She should try to live a life that's meaningful. And it hit me. And this is the rite of passage moment I'm talking about. It's like, listen, if I don't do that, she's never going to do that. So I just want to invite people to look at their families. And if they want the best life for their children, to start making those decisions inside yourself. Maybe that means changing your relationship. Maybe that means leaving a job. Maybe that means making small changes in your diet or going for a walk. But I want to invite people right now to look at their kids and ask the question, am I being the best possible role model for them? Because I think that that's real power. And that's a little personal ritual that you can do, right?
Yeah, and I think that, when you do that type of exercise, don't hold yourself in, judgment, just
right.
Remove the
awareness
judgment of and the shame of whatever.
Yeah.
And just say, I can choose to do something different right now. I can choose to tune in, and I can stop, as my son wants sometimes, stop working, stop looking at my phone, and just be totally present there. And that's something that I can do. And that little moment, will have way more impact than potentially 10 dad speeches I might give him as he grows up. Just
without a
tuning
doubt,
in, being present, and undivided attention. And they want that. I remember my son asked me for that, and if I'm holding myself in judgment now, it is something that I should work on, and I do, and I will as soon as this is done.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like, I'm a fan of Aldous Huxley. And if you look at his books, like, you can kind of see his trajectory where, in my opinion, I have no basis for this except my own opinion of it. But, you see him move from like the Doors of Perception to Brave New World to the Island. And in Brave New World, he sees psychedelics as sort of an escapism, as sort of the soma is a way in which you can disassociate from society so that you can continue on in society. But then when you look at the Island, he tells stories of children that are like 11 or 12, and they have a mentor, and they climb this mountain and sit at a church and understand what's possible. Do you think that it's possible that we could go in one of those two directions with psychedelics? Can it become a disassociative that pushes society in the wrong way versus being something that moves society in the right way?
I think all things are possible.
Well said.
I think that that's why it's important to be intentional.
Yeah.
To be aware, be honest with what's happening. I don't think it's, disassociation, while it can be wonderful, therapeutic process, can also be a harmful consequence. If you disassociate from your emotions, if you don't feel, that's not living.
Yeah.
And I do think that there's a potential for that. And, we need to explore it. We need to understand it more. And especially in our Western models, where it's not really integrated into the fabric of humanity, like who we really are and who we've been for forever and ever and ever. It's even more important to follow our Western ways of discernment, right?
Yeah.
So we should study it, collect the data, understand, talk about, pre-existing conditions that might not make this suitable, so on and so forth. and do no harm. Try not to.
Yeah, the Hippocratic Oath, right? Eric, our hour flew by like that, man. Boom. That's what happens when you have good conversations, man. It's fun, it's engaging, and much like a psychedelic experience, time is but an illusion in these conversations. It just flies right by. But before I let you go, man, where can people find you? What do you have coming up, and what are you excited about?
So I'm very excited about my law firm, Holon Law Partners. We're a cloud-based law firm. We're remote, which really means we're everywhere. And our lawyers are building a community in this space that's intentional. Where we want to be at those points of impact in the world. We're not all doing psychedelic law. We're doing a variety of different things,
Right.
but we are very intentional, and we're trying to create community within us and outside of us. And check us out if you need support, but just get to know us even if you don't. I'm on LinkedIn. That's where I primarily do professional stuff. So you can find me there, or whatever. I'm around.
Yeah, I would encourage everybody to go and check out the Holon. It seems to me that your ability to be meaningful and intention is going to create a better area for people to dialogue in and construct great arguments and construct great community. So I'm really thankful that you and your team are out there doing these things. So go down to the show notes, ladies and gentlemen, and check it all out. That's all we got for today. Oh, what was the name of that book by
I will get it to you after.
Okay.
I'm blanking on the name, but I'll get it for you.
Okay, and then we'll put it in the show notes, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everyone has a beautiful day. Go check out Eric. Check out Holon Law Firm, and that's all we got for today. Hold on briefly afterwards, Eric. I'll talk to you shortly. But ladies and gentlemen, aloha.